Hi.
Oh, that's an intro.
It's cool, isn't it? I had nothing to do with it, apart from, I was going to say, it's got my book cover in it, but even that I didn't design, so I can't take any credit.
Very cool. I love it.
That's all. As you can see, everybody, I'm joined by the inimitable, I can never say that word, inimitable C J Tudor. It's so lovely to talk to you. I've been following your career since The Chalk Man, and when I saw that you were doing a vampire book, I don't squeal very often, but I saw your name and then this fanged lettering. I was like, yes, finally. Have you been waiting for this moment? Have you just been biding your time?
Do you know what I've so wanted to write a vampire book for ages and ages, and I think I had to get to the right point to kind of almost let my publishers let me write a vampire book. So I kind of like departed a little bit from sort of a little bit of crime thrillerness with The Drift last year, and then I kind of sold it to. I spoke to my agent. I said, so I've got this idea for a new book, and I want to set it in Alaska, in a small town in Alaska, and there's a brutal murder, and there's a plucky female detective. And vampires. And she was like, oh.
That's something at the end. I like that. Like she was with me.
Vampires. Yeah, they let me run with it, fortunately. And yeah, but I think the thing is, because there's been so many, interpretations of vampires, and a lot of, obviously it's vampires are just like everlastingly popular, aren't they? There's just something about them. So I knew if I did it, I wanted it had to be different. It had to be a fresh take. I didn't want sparkly vampires. I wanted to sort of add something to the genre rather than just kind of sort of repeat any sort of tropes. Obviously, you've got to have some tropes, because it's vampires. There's certain things you want to have, but I wanted to kind of put my stamp on it.
You definitely did that. I love the fact that, without spoiling, there were particular characters where I loved working out whether they were vampires or not. I think that's my favorite vampire trope. And with it being Alaska, and the time of year, anybody can be a vampire because you can't use the daylight to reveal them. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? Before we delve a bit more into the plot of the book, can you tell us about how did you decide which vampire tropes you were going to include, and which some of them I think you played with and then did something different, which I really liked. How did you decide which ones you were going to lean into and which ones you were going to do your own thing?
Well, the basic premise of the vampires in the Gathering is that they've always existed in this world. Vampires and humans have always existed in the same world, but it's an uneasy, to say the least, kind of coexistence. Basically, because of, even though the vampires generally aren't really a threat to humans, overall, they tend to just exist on, animal blood. Humans, because of superstition and fear that's grown up around them, have, hunted them almost into extinction. So, there are in this world only a few remote colonies of vampires living in sort of isolated areas, in the world. And those colonies are protected now. It's got to a stage where it's like, okay, we have to protect them. There aren't many of the vampire species left. So they are protected. They can't be hunted or killed, unless, of course, they pose a threat to human life, which, is where the book kind of comes in. So I wanted my vampires, they couldn't really be supernatural, So in the book, they're real, they exist. They can live for hundreds of years. They've got more longevity of life than humans, but they are mortal. They will die eventually. They can be killed. The odd stake through the heart or decapitation works, but that would work to kill most people. But we kept that. They obviously have the fangs. They come through sort of when the vampires come to puberty. They tend to develop the fangs, the sort of distinctive fangs. But wary of persecution, a lot of my vampires have filed their fangs to kind of fit in, so they won't be sort of picked out. Yes, they exist on blood. And although daylight isn't great for them, they're not going to kind of burst into flames if they're exposed to daylight. It's just not, they prefer darkness. They prefer cold darkness. Daylight isn't great. So I wanted to kind of keep some of the sort of mythology, but make them more real. You can see them in mirrors. They're not going to, dissolve into smoke or turn into bats. They are real creatures. They're just very different creatures from humans that have kind of, come to exist alongside humans. And I didn't kind of want them to be sexy or twinkly, or they're almost more feral and brutal. They've been forced to live on the edges of society and kind of scrape out their own existence. So they're kind of a little bit more dirty, brutal, feral kind of creatures, and not, and they've developed their own communities and their own rules and existence. And that was sort of more how I pictured them.
Yeah, they're not living in mansions, dressing
like mansions. Almost like they've become almost like travelers. They sort of set up their colonies in the Gathering. They've set up their colony in an old abandoned mine in the mountains, an abandoned copper mine in the mountains near this small town in Alaska. And and that's where they've sort of created colony. But, you know, that's it. They've had to live on the edges of sort of, you know, human society because they're not allowed to join into human society. They're protected, but they can't, you know, work or be part of human society. So they live in a kind of ragtag kind of basic way.
Yeah, I really like the fact that with your books, with your vampires, but also with the other things that you do, they're very much grounded in a real world. And then they just take this little step into the supernatural. And I think that's what makes them so chilling. I like things. I'm not a huge fantasy reader. I'm getting into it a bit more now.
Yeah.
I love things that feel like they're just stretching the degree of possibility, like in a really creepy direction. I really liked that. So I wondered, is that something that you've done deliberately? Because I think that seems to go... I don't know, does it go across all of your books or just most of them?
Possibly, I think, and I've probably pushed it a bit more and a bit more with each book. But yeah, I think I like that. I like the idea that, you know, it's real. It's a real world, not necessarily quite the same as the one we're in. And then you just take a little bit of a step, sort of slightly off. It becomes a little bit more random. There's something else going on. There's something a bit weirder going on over here. And I like that. I like that kind of, I don't know. It's this fascination I have, I suppose, perhaps growing up reading a lot of Stephen King and watching those kind of films set in suburbia where something goes darkly wrong. You know, there's the Indian burial ground underneath the housing estate. That idea of like everything seeming quite normal, but oh God, actually, there's a curveball here. Things aren't as normal as you know you think they are. There's something else happening here. There's something a bit weirder, and I really like playing with that. But then I think, you know, you've got to keep your reality quite real in that. I like the idea of signing people up to something so it feels real. And then when you go and take maybe a step off, perhaps more into the supernatural or the crazy or the strange or whatever, then they go with you. You know, you keep everything as real as possible so that, you know, people go on that journey a little bit off kilter.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely works. And I love the fact that with this book, you meet your female detective and she is a great character. She felt just like a real person to me, Barbara. She's so good. And I love the fact that it was kind of bureaucracy. Like she was just doing her job and ticking a box and checking whether this is a vampire calling or not. But then I hate saying raise the stakes when I'm talking about vampire books. But it just came into my head. It really does raise the stakes because she isn't just investigating a murder. What she finds out will take down that whole colony if it does turn out to be a vampire. And I thought that created a real sense of sort of atmosphere. And I think the Alaskan setting only cemented that more. Not only is she in this really difficult situation of life or death, she also can't escape from it because then she's in Alaska and the weather, you know, is bearing down on them. Was the Alaskan setting always with you from the beginning for this book, or did that kind of come later?
No, it came right at the start, actually, because I mean, I'm a big fan of the film 30 Days of Night, obviously, Vampires, Alaska, which is a great premise. I didn't want to kind of ape that, but it made me think, you know, this is a great setting for a book. And I wanted that kind of isolated setting. And sometimes you need a bigger sort of canvas for books. And it just, I thought, very small town, snow, Alaska, isolated, you know, kind of can't really escape. It just seemed like a really good setting for the vampires. And then the more I looked into it and did research, and I kind of centered in on one town I thought was like really good kind of to base my town of Deadheart on. And then there was, you know, I was doing more research about like the copper mines and the gold mines in Alaska. And, you know, I found this really cool abandoned mine that's in Kennecott McCarthy, I think it is. And something about that, I just saw that and thought, oh my God, wouldn't it be amazing if my vampires lived in this old abandoned mine? Because that is just so freaky and creepy as well. And just all of it seemed to come together. And it just seemed like the perfect setting. And yeah, that sense of isolation you get in these, it's such a vast sort of place, but the towns, you know, are really small and spread out. And also there was that idea of, because in the novel, central to the novel is the idea that, you know, for centuries humans have hunted vampires. And, you know, the idea of this small community that has always had a vampire colony, but the way they've dealt with it is basically by hunting them. And when you hunt, you keep trophies. So, you know, instead of sort of animal trophies or amidst the animal trophies upon the walls of the bars and places, you know, you get, you know, vampire skulls and teeth. They collect vampire teeth and display them as trophies and use stakes and things. So that their hunting memorabilia is from, you know, when they were able to hunt the vampires. And I thought that can only really exist. The idea exists in this small, quirky town. I think we say at one point, you know, you wouldn't see things like this in somewhere liberal, like, you know, say New York or California, but, you know, you still get these remnants of sort of, you know, the past way vampires were dealt with in these small communities. I found that really interesting too. So yeah, it was always there from the start, and it really, you know, it really sort of added that whole character to the book as well. But I was a little bit wary to start with, because I thought, if you write about somewhere, obviously I'm not from America, I don't live in America, I don't live in Alaska, that you need to visit it. So I did a lot of research online. And then last year, my husband and I traveled out to Alaska for a week in May. Yeah, it was kind of a flying visit. It's a long way to go. There's no easy way to get to Alaska. It's a lot of traveling. But we went to Seattle, then to Anchorage, and then we got the Alaskan Railroad to a town called Talkeetna, which is a sort of small town in kind of central sort of Alaska. And I kind of based Dead Heart on Talkeetna, but actually even less kind of touristy than Talkeetna, because Talkeetna does actually attract people in because it's near the Denali National Park and the mountains. So it does get sort of visitors and tourists there who go for the climbing and that type of thing. And I wanted Dead Heart to be even sort of more isolated than that. But it just really helped to get that in my head, because it's just like one street, and then houses are kind of built here and there and everywhere, and it's got sort of a bar here and an old kind of bar here, and there's a little bit of mix of new and old, new people coming in, and the old traditional sort of Alaskans have always lived there, but it's just a really weird, quirky place, and it was just so useful to go and like get that color. And I took lots of photographs, and we talked to people, and just for what the houses looked like, and picturing that main street. And the cemetery is amazing. And that I used that in the book, because cemetery is like walking into Pet Cemetery. It's such a weird cemetery, because a lot of people die in planes and climbing the mountains. Like, instead of like headstones, some of them have like plane propellers as a headstone, or like climbing tackle and stuff. And it's just really kind of, it's weird and spooky, and just the whole place is just so weird and quirky. It was just perfect. It was like everything I wanted when we went to visit. And they had all their animal trophies in the bars and stuff, like bear skins and skulls and animal heads. So it was just perfect. So even stuff that people eat in books and things like that, like reindeer sausage, I had never heard of. But it's a big thing. Like, everything seems to come with reindeer sausage in Talkeetna. It was like,
I get that from my little boy, who's
reindeer sausage with that. Yeah,
obsessed with Santa and Rudolph, or just not.
I think Bob makes fun about Santa, being a bit pushed to find any reindeer in this town.
Oh gosh, I mean, so how far into the process were you into writing the book when you went there? Had you already got a lot of it, and then you used that to fill in the gaps?
I'd pretty much written the book. And then the visit was to just make sure that it was sound, really, in a way. And I would have rewritten what didn't work. But, fortunately, most of my online research had been pretty good. And then it was just adding in all the colour, I think, really. And tweaking a few little bits, which weren't quite right. And just, but it just really helped. It made me feel that it was as authentic as it could be. And I'm sure there's bits I've got wrong still, because there probably will be. But, I was really keen to make it as authentic as I possibly could. So I could say, look, I did go, I did visit, I did do my research.
I think there's
you go like, no, I did go.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a real place. It's based on elements of real places. But I'd like to think that people with fiction, like my books set in New Orleans, the ones I've done so far, and like you said, I don't live there, but I went to visit, and
yay! I'd love to go to New Orleans.
Yeah, you would absolutely love it. I think all the things you've described that you like, the spookiness just absolutely hits you when you're there. The cemetery. There's a pharmacist museum, like a museum of medicine, and so much stuff to do with voodoo and vampires. It's just so interesting.
Definitely up my street. Yeah,
it's really great. And I knew I wanted to set a book there when I went. I'd not written anything that had been published before, but you've just got to do your research, but also people know that it's fiction, and for every real thing that you use, I added I used one of the real cemeteries, but I added conveniently a vampire's crypt that their bodies had mysteriously got up and left, so I think people know that you're going to use something real but then take it, and I can't imagine there's that many Alaskans who are going to sit and kind of fact check your book. Anyway, maybe there might be, but
you never know. I mean, I always find there's nearly always somebody who wants to be a pedant about something. There always is. Some people do like to kind of like pick on the details, but that's fair enough. You put yourself up for that when you write books, and you can say it's fiction, but sometimes if someone picks up on something, it's fair enough to go, do you know what? Okay, well, I know that for next time.
I mean, this is why we have editors, isn't it? That I've had editors pick stuff up sometimes. Like, I'd said something was Spanish in New Orleans and it was actually French, or it might have been vice versa. And my editor picked that up, and I was like, oh, phew, thank you. And the same with the second book. My sensitivity reader picked up one little thing. And this is why there's so many people in the publishing process. You try and catch it all, don't you, as an author?
And language as well, I think, because, you know, the proofs that went out hadn't been through, I think, the final sort of, you know, proofs. They're uncorrected still. I think some people have commented about language. Oh, this isn't sort of, you know, this isn't what you'd say in the US. And it's like, well, I've tried to do it as much as possible. But, you know, my US editor then went through it and like corrected every little tiny thing that we could. Because it's just those silly bits of language, isn't it? You know, you use trunk instead of boot and blacktop instead of tarmac and all those just small things of language that, you know, you want to get right. But there's always a weird thing that throws you, isn't there? Because in the book originally, I had Barbara in this hotel room and I mentioned that, you know, that there's a kettle and she makes herself a cup of coffee with a kettle. And I was like, no, we don't have kettles. What? And I visited America. Actually, you're right. I've never seen a kettle in an American hotel room. They don't have kettles generally, because it's something to do with voltage and electricity. And they certainly don't have them in hotel rooms. She's like, it would more like to be some kind of coffee machine or something in there, a little coffee machine you might have. I'm like, okay, fine. Yeah, but I'd never have known that. It didn't even occur to me. You know, they wouldn't have the old, you know, the tea and coffee making facilities and the kettle that, you know, you get in almost every hotel room in the UK. So it's funny. It's weird little stuff sometimes that little disparities that, you know, your editors hopefully, you know, will catch for you.
Yeah, that's the Brit in us, isn't it? Looking for the cup of tea. Where I now take.
What do you mean I don't have a kettle? But thinking about it, she's right. I'm thinking when I've been to America, no, they don't tend to have that in hotel rooms. Much to our, you know, displeasure that you can't make yourself a cup of tea.
Yeah, I know. That's normally the first thing I do when I get back from holiday. I've now started taking tea with me because generally I can't find tea to my specifications on holiday.
I'm very selfish. No, I don't know what is it with people make tea. I like my tea quite strong, you see. And it's just always really weak. It's really hard to get a good cup of tea.
It is. Make it yourself. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about is obviously is it 7 books in now, including your short story collection?
It is, including the short stories. Yeah.
So how do you do it? How do you come up with something that's new and fresh, but still feels like you, and that just feels new for the genre, but also new for yourself and your own moving your writing on? How do you do it?
I think this is why I don't do series, because I would get bored. You know, I'm too fickle. I can't stay with the same characters. I've got like have a new set of characters and new. I think, yeah, that's what keeps it interesting for me. It's always like, you know, another fun idea that I want to write. So that, you know, the current book has got, you know, elements of time travel and stuff in it and weird things going on in girls' boarding school. So yeah, I just quite fancied writing a girls' boarding school, but I didn't just want to do just a straightforward thriller. That would be dull. That would be interesting enough. So I thought some sort of time travel and things and serial killer would liven up a bit.
Of
course it would. So that idea then quite excited me. And then I've already got an idea for the book after that quite excites me and interests me again. And I would like to do another short story collection because I love doing short stories, and I've already got a title for that. So yeah, I've always got like the next idea on the boil, I think, and that sometimes that helps. It's a help and a hindrance, because sometimes it's something to look forward to when you're at like a tricky point in a book, and then sometimes you can find yourself going, I must finish this book so I can write the new shiny idea. Because you know, as soon as you're writing the book, it stops being the new shiny idea and just becomes, oh God.
It's a strange thing, isn't it? Did you write initially as a hobby alongside your other job, or did you? Because I did that, and I think that I've had a weird mental shift that now writing is the main thing I do with other things to supplement it. It's hard to think that is my job sometimes.
Yes. Yeah, it's sort of the hobby becomes the job, and though I still find myself treating it as a hobby, sometimes I still always have the laptop there. But yeah, that is the job, and you feel like you need to find another writing hobby. That's why I like writing short stories. Actually, it was really nice when I had that sort of gap between one novel and then putting it at the drift, because I was writing the drift, but in between I could go and write a short story without feeling guilty about it. That kind of almost became like a hobby, because I was also going to be doing the short stories, and I really enjoyed that, because it was a bit like, I'm going to take a break and I'm just going to write a short story for a few days. And that was really good. I think it's why I'm quite keen to do another short story collection, because it's a different mental workout to writing a book. It's just feels like that's fun. And then the book writing, I don't say the book writing isn't fun, which is silly, because I love writing, but every book gets to a stage where it's quite hard work. There's a stage in every book where I absolutely hate it and I don't want to sit down and write. But I know that's the case now, and I know that I just have to get over that hump. And then when I get I bring it all together, and then when I get to the sort of second draft, I love the second draft. The first draft's just a ball ache a lot of the time. It's just getting it all in place, and excuse my language, but it's just getting it all there and getting it all together. and sort of just roughly getting everything in place and getting to the end of it. And then for me, the second draft is where I really have the real fun of tightening it all up and properly fleshing out characters perhaps a little bit more and just making sure it all knits together. So but I think I understand that process now, and I know what I'm like when I'm writing books. Every time I get to the end of one, I'm a bit like, geez, how did that happen? There was a point where I thought I would never get to the end of this book, and I'm always slightly surprised when I do.
They're just so big, and I think that's why I've got into short stories lately. I've written 3 or 4 short stories, not a full book of them like you have, in the past year for various things, and they are just really freeing because they're so small. You're only aiming towards this one sting in the tail or twist or thing you want to say, and you can just kind of keep it all in your head.
And you can have more fun. I think you can have kind of crazier ideas with short stories because you haven't got to stretch it for a whole book. So quite often ideas, I mean, that's a really good idea, but it wouldn't go for a whole book. I couldn't make it play out for a whole book, but it would work for a short story. I think that's what makes them quite freeing as well. You can just use ideas that wouldn't work for a book. I've got a great one I want to write in the new short story collection. I'm just so eager to write it, just because I know it's going to be such a lot of fun. And I'd love to write it as a book, but I just don't. It would not, it wouldn't fill a whole book. But it'd be a cracking short story.
Yeah, that's exciting for us to read it. So how do you find that ideas just come to you then? Like, it just pops into your head, or do you sit and actively tease out and think about what you want to do?
It's a mixture sometimes, isn't it? I think it probably is for a lot of people. Sometimes the idea just kind of comes, and that's a great starting off point. Or sometimes I'll sort of just be mulling and thinking, I'd quite like to do this. And like with the Gathering, it was very much like I wanted to write a vampire book. And I found myself mulling sort of about ways I might do it. And then I started thinking about the Alaska, and then the whole idea of the hunting and everything, and the vampires almost being persecuted. And then that seemed like a really fun, fresh take on it. And it kind of went from there. So I think it's a mixture of both. I'm always mulling on the next book when I'm writing a book, because I'm still mulling about the one after this one at the moment. Different things that I want to do with it. Interesting, I almost even considered writing it as a script rather than a book. I think I'm still going to write it as a book. It's constant. I think it's a mixture of science. I really like that idea. And then you kind of mull and think what you can do with it. Again, because you're working out that process of, can I make this work for a whole book? Is it going to sustain what can I add to it? Is it too simplistic? What sort of, what things can I add to it? So I think I don't know about you, it's that process. I have generally something will spark an idea,
yes,
and then I have to work it around a little bit.
Yeah, my short story in this classic anthology, I'm normally terrible with titles, and my friend Mia had got her idea, and we're putting this anthology together.
Right.
We were doing it, both of us, and she was like, oh, I'm going to do about my Polish heritage, and it's going to be Red Riding Hood, and she'd got all these great ideas, and I sat there going, I've got nothing. I've got a book idea, and it was the opposite problem. It was too big for a short story, and I was like, I can't do this. And suddenly I just went, what about if it was called The House with Teeth? And she was like, that's gross. Why would a house have teeth? And I was like, why would a house have teeth? And the title just popped into my head, and then I had to backwards engineer it and figure out why would a house have teeth and want to eat people. And it's interesting how I do sometimes get like a little snippet of an idea. And like you said, I like to know what the next couple are, so I can just let them simmer. Because I think I don't come out with Mia, again, who I put the anthology together with. She could write you a synopsis of the next thing she wants to write and just keep teasing it out, like almost in one go. And I can't do that. I need to like drip feed ideas, and they come really slowly, and I pull them out and keep them going. And I couldn't sit within a week and give you an idea. It would take me probably several weeks to know even what the book's about. But I find that really, really interesting that we all get
works it in a different way, don't they? And besides, it can be I think a title can often just really spark off an idea. I've got song lyrics sometimes will spark off ideas for me. I think it just can come from anywhere, and you just gets your mind ticking over, doesn't it? And that's fascinating. It's an interesting process. I think everybody does it differently, but my idea is generally fairly vague to start with. The Drift was about the only one that I had that I actually had a certain ending.
Right,
that's really definitely knew the ending right from the start, because mostly I have a vague sort of idea, and I change it quite a lot along the way. I'm still about 2/3 through the current book, and I haven't quite decided who the bad guys are going to be. I think that hopefully keeps it quite interesting for there's only a small cast of characters, and I haven't quite decided who are going to be the evil ones out of them yet. So I'm keeping
that's really good. The books that I've done that I think have worked the best, both the second and third book, I changed my mind who the killer was because I just fell in love with one of the characters and I couldn't have him go out in the blaze of glory that I want. I was like, no, I need this person for the next book. He's too interesting. So I did change it, and then everybody thought it was this person. I'm like, yes, because I'd seeded a certain direction. So I think it can be quite useful. So do you do any plotting, or do you just do that initial idea gathering?
Just initial, get the idea there. And once I've got an idea, I normally start writing it as soon as, if I can, start getting that first chapter down to get a feel for the voice of how I'm going to write it. And then once I've got that, I kind of know where I am with it. If I can't get that initial feel for the voice of the book and the style, then I start to know it's not going to work. But yeah, then I just write, really. It really is the pantser approach, which like you say, I think can keep it interesting, because I think, again, in twists and turns, if you don't know kind of who done it 2/3 of the way through, and maybe you had an idea it was going to be someone else, then you'll have written it almost to that way, which actually is a natural kind of misdirection, because then you change your mind, and it hopefully then it surprises the reader as well. So I do the whole make it up as I go along, which is fun because lots of ideas come to you part way along. Like when I was again writing The Gathering, I had the idea for the vampires, and I had Barbara going into this town. And then there's this encounter in chapter 3 where she's in the cab with the driver, and they almost run down this kid in the town. He almost knocks him, and he runs over past the cab. And then Barbara finds a bit of blood and glass on the floor. And I actually had no idea what the glass and the blood were going to be. I didn't quite know what the relevance would be. I just felt there had to be something there that I would work out later on. And that ended up being quite a big plot point in the book. But I hadn't thought of that plot point originally. I just thought I need some, and then it developed kind of naturally. And so, I quite often do that. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you go back and take things out because it hasn't worked. I put things in sometimes and then take them back out again, and that happens a lot of the time. But I think, I like stuff to grow organically, plot wise. And I think if you don't always know where it's going, hopefully it keeps it a bit more surprising when you're reading it. But there are sometimes you do write yourself into a bit of a dead end, and I quite often you have to change things and work them around, and something didn't quite work, but that's just the writing and editing process. I think I'm not someone who has to get every chapter perfect as she goes along. I'm quite happy and going, that'll do, and I'll go back and change that later.
I think in thrillers, dead ends are quite useful anyway, aren't they? Because you don't want a detective who's just kind of solving everything really easily. So sometimes your natural stumbling block can also become your character stumbling block. I find it really hard. I've tried plotting. I've tried Save the Cat and plotting however many beats that is, and I just dry up and I don't know past a certain
Save the Cat.
Have you not heard of Save the Cat?
Save the Cat.
No. So it started as plotting screenplays, and then somebody wrote Save the Cat writes a novel. It's based on the idea that if you want to show what a character's really made of, they've got to save a cat at the beginning of a book, and it's not an actual cat, it's a metaphorical cat. It's showing their heroic qualities. So I think it came from various places, but I've tried the novel writing one, and it's sort of a blank. I got to a certain point and I was like, I actually don't know until I write this. I don't know. I've never managed to put out a whole book yet.
I don't know if people do it.
Do you find that certain scenes come to you very visually and they're not necessarily in the right order? So normally with the Mina books, there'll be one creepy location that I'm really fixated on, and it's just a blank of how I get there until I actually get there. And sometimes it's Mina sitting in a room and she's like, I need to figure out my next step. And I'm like, oh God, this is me actually now needing to figure out my next step, give her some agency. Is it again, I don't I think you can't force it. It depends on you as a person. I don't know, we're all different, aren't we?
I think you try and explain to someone who plots how you write, and there's a look of horror. But similarly, I think if you pantser it, to some, the idea of sitting down and plotting is just, it's mind-numbing to me. And like I say, I wouldn't know where to start because the ideas only come to me when I write. I can't preempt them. Like I say, I think maybe it's because if you do write visually, I write quite visually, and I'll often know there's little bits I need to get to, and I have to manipulate my characters to get there, and I'll have certain visual scenes in my mind of things that I want to happen. But I don't know until I start writing. I don't know where this is going until I start writing it. I can't have it in my head and plot it all out. It's really weird. The idea of being able to do that is so alien to me. I would just sit there and go, I don't know, I could write something, but it won't be the book that I write. So I'm just wasting my time, essentially. I might as well just write it.
I'm going to use this as validation for my future.
No, yeah.
I feel like I have to say, well, I'm going to remember this interview.
I remember someone saying that they wrote like a 30,000 word novel plan before they started, but I'm just thinking, but you could have written 30,000 words of the book. I mean, I'm going to waste my time doing that. So yeah, I think it's everybody has different ways, and I don't think you can really change how you write.
No. You can add little things like, again, Mia, I stole this idea from her, that she bullet points if she gets stuck on a scene and she just doesn't want to write it. She bullet points that scene to kind of free her to write the next one. And I've tried that and it did work. But then I've talked to my friend Melissa Welliver, writes like post-apocalyptic fiction quite often. And she does this 20,000-30,000 outline for her, 80K YA book.
Wow.
And I listened to her explaining it and I was like, I can't see it. But for her, that means she can write and plot a book within a couple of months. Whereas I'm probably going to wade through it for maybe 4 or 5 months, trying to figure out what I'm doing. But that just works for me. I think the worst one I've heard is Annalise Avery is an amazing middle grade and YA author. And she writes her whole first draft and then deletes it. And then writes the next draft. That's the only one where I've thought I'm never going to try that. I'm going to try some other things. I'm never going to delete the whole draft. There's always
I don't delete anything. I'm like a hoarder of words. Even if something doesn't work, I save it and put it somewhere because I never know, I might want to come back to it. I'm an awful hoarder. I can't bear to delete anything permanently. When I was writing The Drift, I lost 10,000 words.
Oh no, that's like
because I was working through my laptop and my desktop, and something had happened in iCloud, and I'd opened a different version downstairs. And because I was editing at the time, I wasn't like physically writing. I hadn't realised that. Well, basically, I cocked up and I saved over something, and then I realised I'd lost 10,000 words. And because I'd saved over it, there's just absolutely no way to get them back. And I remember me and my husband being up to like 2 or 3 in the morning trying to find a way to see if we could retrieve a previous version, and we couldn't. And I just had to sit there and go, right, I've just got to rewrite 10,000 words. Okay, here we go. But yeah, so the idea of like getting rid of stuff. I mean, I did it, and I managed to fortunately, I hadn't edited those 10,000 words. Otherwise, that would have been worse. They were still in very draft form. But yeah, I can't imagine why you would do that. Why? Why would you do that?
Like your first draft, that as you're writing it, it's not the best thing you could write. She just says that she just feels freed, that she's figured out the book, and then she writes the book she'd want to write. But I just find there's too much. The first draft isn't good, but there's too much good stuff in it that I wouldn't want to get rid of.
You might forget and not be able to replicate. Whereas what I do is I rewrite a lot of the first draft, and when it comes to my my editors, when they give me their notes, because what's nice then is you've had like a break of at least a month or 2, or sometimes 2, away from the book. So when I get my editor's notes and go back to the book, it's so freeing because I'm like, great, now I can look at it properly, and using their notes as well. I basically probably. Part of the rewriting process then is some of their notes, but some of it's just me rewriting it for my sake as well, because I can find a way to do it better. And so I rewrite a lot of the book at that stage, move chapters around, rewrite complete chapters, delete complete chapters quite often. But the idea of losing the whole thing, I don't think I could be quite that bold. It just fills me with this kind of horror.
Yeah, there are definitely extremes, aren't there? And I think that's
I think that's it.
The extreme scale. I'm just going to check my list. I feel like we've talked about most of the things I wanted to ask you. This is another one. How do you make sure books are scary? Because this is a thing that I wrestle with for YA. I think my scary bits are the bits I find the most difficult because they're obviously not scary to me. Like, I think if I read a sexy scene, like a kissing scene, like I can kind of appreciate it as a reader, but I think a scary scene's hard because you're not likely to scare yourself in the same way. So how do you do it? Like because your books definitely are, they vary from creepy and atmospheric to terrifying, like within the book. How do you do that?
I don't know if you ever kind of get it right. I think, books are obviously different to like watching something visually because you can't jump scare someone in a book. You can't get that kind of scare. So you're hoping to just do things that are kind of maybe creepy, scary in a way that it stays with somebody, that they might remember a particular scene because it's maybe a bit disturbing, or it just creeps them out in the way you describe it. I think that's what you're hoping for with the book, is for someone to kind of maybe go away from it, and then a certain bit maybe comes back to you in the dead of night, and you get that kind of feeling of, oh god, I wish I hadn't read that now. which is perhaps what you're aiming for. And I guess, you know, I don't generally aim for scary. I aim to write something that to me is entertaining and perhaps has bits in that are a bit creepy or a bit scarier. They obviously, you know, generally don't scare me because I'm writing it. I think it's just I'd say perhaps I don't know. I just kind of set the scene and write it as I think it would. It just works. There has to be some drama. There has to be some kind of scared bits that are a bit sort of more shocking than others, and that's part and parcel of telling the story. I don't know whether it's something you realise you're doing actually. You know, certainly, you know, I know what I like is that in chapters, you know, I'm a big one for having that good kind of cliffhanger at the end of a chapter, end it with a, you know, reveal or a question, and sometimes that might be perhaps something scary. In the Burning Girls, you know, at the end of, I think it's the third chapter ever, we have a girl appear covered in blood, and then we have the Burning Girls themselves appear, and they're pretty creepy because they're on fire, and it's pretty scary. But yeah, often I think you're going for that kind of like just odd sentence or visual thing that just creates that sense of unease that might prey on someone's mind and they think about it later, I guess, really. And I think, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? You know, I mean, I do have a little bit of gore sometimes in books and some of that. I'm not a huge fan of things that are overly graphic. I think, you know, sparing. I like to be sparing if I'm going to have something that's a little bit more gory in there, because I don't like things that are gratuitous. I'm not a fan of books that use, you know, really gratuitous torture or violence. I think you can create something without being really graphic. It's more what you don't say and what you don't see. I'm always a big believer in that. It's an interesting question, really. And I imagine with YA, because I don't know, I think kids are more and more hardcore as well, aren't they? I think my little girl, she's 10 and a half, and she's not scared of things that I was scared of at her age. You know, we watched like the new Ghostbusters recently, and she'd seen the original Ghostbusters, and I remember like the ghost in the library really scaring me when I was about 13, and she's just like, yeah, you know, she just takes it all in her stride.
Kids are amazing, and I think that they're scared of different things from what we are as well, because there's certain stuff that we have kind of in our imagination we've let go of and said, okay, you know, there is no monster under my bed, hopefully. Yes. You know, my wardrobe's probably not a portal to another world, but I kind of wish it was, depending on the world. But I think, yeah, children are really interesting. And I think YA, you know, you're writing for a lot of adults as well. So yeah, I always think about the YA reader, but also put some nods, especially because my book's set in the 90s. I think the adults enjoy the pop culture references more than the teens do, because to the teens, they are, you know, historical record, and they are
terrifying, isn't it?
I've done historical fiction panels. It makes me really sad when they're like, yes, you write historical fiction, don't you? And I'm like, apparently so.
That was so good
to me. Teenage years are history now. So yeah, it is interesting. I think I'm glad that you said that you don't exactly know. It's quite reassuring, because certain things are just hard to reflect on when it's your own writing. I think, like occasionally I will objectively read it and I think, yes, I can see how the reader will interpret this, but other stuff you've just got no idea. Like one of the last things I wanted to ask you about was twists and reveals, because that's something else that I think is difficult to know. When people ask me what book do you wish you could read for the first time, I often say my own, and it's not an egotistical answer. I just would love to read it, not knowing what happens and seeing whether that twist did land with me. So
again, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you can think that I hope that lands, and you know, but yeah, you don't know. And I always, because readers are really sophisticated as well, and you know, teenagers, young people are really sophisticated, and I think they're really good at guessing twists and reveals more and more. So I'm always trying to try and keep one step ahead and think, would I think this here? And if I would think that, maybe I should do this instead, and kind of always going for that double bluff. But then you don't want it to become ridiculous, which is the other thing as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with twist to me. There are two main problems with it. Either it comes from nowhere and you feel cheated because nowhere was that even a possibility in the story. Yeah. It's like, surprise, she was a ghost all along in a world with no ghost. You know, I would feel cheated. And the same thing where they're so foreshadowed that you're just reading to get to this foregone conclusion. So I think it's finding somewhere between that, isn't it? I remember, I think it was James Masters on an interview, Spike from Buffy for the Uninitiated, said that he liked Joss Whedon's writing because he kept it surprising by thinking about what a good writer would do and then kind of flipping it and doing something different and executing it really well in his own right. So I think he would lean so far into something, and then sometimes he would continue in that direction, the direction you expect, and others he would pull back and do something totally different.
I think, because I think Sarah Pimble once said as well that most books, when they say, oh, they've got a great twist, it's not actually a twist. It is a reveal. You know, there's very few books that actually totally twist the story. I mean, it's not like Gone Girl, yes, totally twists the whole story partway through. And I think Shutter Island's one of my favourite ones as well, because I think, again, it turns the story on its head once you know what's actually going on. It's a wonderful twist reveal. I think that's more of a twist again. But yeah, they're an interesting one. And I always think you shouldn't build. There's nothing worse, is there? When a book with an amazing twist, and I go, well, I don't want to read it because
I know.
Because what I'm going to spend the whole book reading it, trying. I'm not going to read the book. I'm not going to enjoy the book because all I'm thinking about is can I get this blinking twist that I probably will get? Because if you say it's an amazing twist, I immediately think it probably isn't an amazing twist. I'll either, like I say, feel cheated by it or I'll guess it. And I don't think you should build your whole book around that one. Yes, you want to have you want to have a good ending, you want to have a good payoff. I like lots of little reveals in a book as well. So you'll get to one bit and go, oh my god, there's that reveal there, and then there is always a big payoff, but there's some other stuff that you find and you discover along the way. So you have kind of quite a few reveals as you go along. I like chapter endings to have some kind of reveal quite often. So there's like breadcrumbs as well. And I think it's quite good, even if as a reader, if you almost guess something or you're almost there, you get to that point where you're like, of course. But it is a moment you want to get to sometimes as well.
Yes.
So yeah, that sort of ooh moment. It's like TV series as well, isn't it? There was, what was it recently that I watched that was had an excellent, that sprung it on me and I should have guessed it. Severance. Have you seen Severance?
No, I haven't.
There's just a really, really great bit at the end of I can't remember how far into the series it is, but there's a bit where I just sat there and went, oh God, I should have realized that we did not see that or know that, and I should have realized that for this reveal. Can't believe I missed it because it had been so well hidden. It was in plain sight all along, but it had been so well hidden. The distraction had been so good that you'd missed this vital bit of information that you hadn't been given, and it was so well done. And I think there was something in Westworld, the first season as well, where again it was something to do with something that it was just perfect reveal where you went, got that nice little shiver and you went, because a lot of it is misdirection. I think misdirection is a big thing in writing. So the thing that's there in plain sight, I love, if you can misdirect someone, so then they go, of course it was there, you basically gave it to me on a plate, but I didn't see it because you were so misdirecting me somewhere else.
Yeah, I think the thing that did that to me first, probably without spoiling it, was Fight Club. Have you read or watched it?
Yeah.
It's my favourite film because you just had a moment of going, what?
No.
Yes, no, it is. And then it shows you the little moments that gave you that clue. And you're like, oh, how did I not know that?
All along.
Yeah.
I mean, but not well done. And I didn't think, and perhaps because by the time I saw it, I just knew too much about it. What was it called now? The Bruce Willis film with the kid that sees dead people.
Sixth Sense, yeah.
And I just, for the start, I just went, well, he's, probably to anybody who hasn't seen that, I presume everybody has seen that by now. I went, well, he's obviously dead, isn't he? He's obviously dead. I mean, surely everyone knows he's dead. It's quite obvious he's dead, And perhaps that's just because I'd heard too much about it.
I think you or I are the type of people as well who will assume that somebody might be dead. Like
exactly. Maybe that's it.
To anything.
It's our first assumption, isn't it? Well, he's obviously dead.
Yeah, I did that the other day in something, and it was a similar reveal. And I said to Kev, like, I think that X, Y, or Z, like, they're going to be the bad guy. They're going to be. And he said, "How do you know that?" I'm like, it's just the way my mind works now. I think I've ruined fiction and films for myself because I'm always doing what you said, looking for the twist. I'm looking for what is this going to signify. We've just started watching Fallout. Yeah.
Oh, you're watching that Fallout?
Yeah, I just started.
We only watched the first episode so far.
Yeah. And I'm enjoying the fact that I don't know. Like, I can't really tell where it's going, and I quite like that. It feels refreshing for that reason. It
seems quite batshit. We've only watched the first episode so far, and yeah, I was going with it, and then I was a bit like, what's going on with this Ghoul character? This has really thrown me on this. But I like batshit things. Oh, that was the thing in Westworld. It was Neil that got that. It was in the first series where he went, I don't think these two timelines. I think these are different timelines. And as soon as you went, oh my God, these are different timelines, you were just like, oh, of course they are. Of course, these are different timelines because the robots were whatever age. These are different timelines, and that was just a great twist as well. So yeah, I do love it when I'm caught out. But yeah, like you say, you're constantly sort of looking, aren't you, to sort of kind of catch that twist or ready to be fooled. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and you just hope that you can keep readers on their toes. I think that's part of the fun. It's part of the fun. I do enjoy that bit of writing a book and thinking, I hope I've kept people on their toes and they haven't guessed this.
You definitely do. I still remember the very end, and no spoilers here, of the Chalk Man. I'm assuming you'll remember this yourself. There's a particular note that it ends on for the main character. I was like, oh, it gave me a proper shudder through my body. And even thinking now, it gives me a chill. I don't know whether you can remember particularly what I'm referring to. It was on one of the last couple of pages, I think. And I can see where it is on the page, the moment where, and that's power, isn't it? If you can make a reader. I mean, how many years ago did Chalkman come out?
Was that 2018?
Yeah, I'm still thinking about it. So you've got me.
That's brilliant. I love it.
Years later, still on it. That's the dream, isn't it, of an author? So then the last thing I want to ask you before we jump to some questions that people have asked, the last one from me. How did you get your deal for Chalkman? I think you mentioned before we were recording. Were you a slush pile acquisition in terms of agents and then publisher?
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing, trying to get published like lots of authors for probably 10 to 12 years before I got the Chalkman, because I was 46 when the Chalkman was published. So, it was a long time. But I didn't kind of start properly till my 30s to kind of knuckle down and try and write. And we were talking earlier about the bright, shiny idea. And the problem I always had was I was always distracted by the bright, shiny idea. That, I was always like, partway through a book when it got hard, I'd be like, well, I've got this other idea and that's better. And then I'd abandon that and start something else. So I had so many half-finished ideas. It just took me ages to write, to sort of knuckle down and finish something. And then I did have, before the Chalkman deal, I wrote a book and I submitted it to a different agent and they took me on. And I was with them for 2 years and I never got a sniff of a publisher. And I think it was partly because I don't think I was writing what they kind of represented pure crime novelists. And I kept going a bit Stephen King on them. And they kept trying to rein me back in. And I think we ended up in a position where neither of us was really happy with what I was writing. And I made the decision, I think, sort of 2 years in, that I wasn't happy. And, I wasn't getting anywhere. And that I would leave that agent. And they were a great agent, don't get me wrong, they were a really good agent. But it just wasn't working. And that was one of the kind of weirdest, craziest decisions that I made. Because as soon as I'd done it, I was like, I must be an idiot. Because now I've left, I don't have an agent now. I've literally thrown myself back in the slush pile. What insanity is this? But it felt quite freeing. I think I knew it was wrong. And what I wanted to write, they didn't get. And it just wasn't going to work. But then it was several years. I sort of, went back to doing what I was doing, which was, freelance writing. And then I set up a dog walking business and I had my daughter. And I was trying to write in between all the time. And I would send short stories to sort of some women's magazines and stuff and get a bit of extra money from that, which was great because I didn't earn very much dog walking. And then it was Betty's second birthday. Some friends gave her these chalks for her birthday, a tub of chalks. And I'm sorry if I've probably told this story a lot. Basically, no, so she got this set of chalks for her second birthday, and we decided, because they were, chalks, we went out and we draw on the driveway outside, and she wanted to draw stick figures. She wanted to draw these stick figures in lots of different colours, doing lots of different things. And so we covered the driveway in these stick figures. And then went inside and basically forgot about it. And then later that night, probably about 11 o'clock, I opened the door to let the dog out. And the security light came on. It just illuminated all these stick figures all over the driveway that I'd completely forgotten were there. And actually, I went, oh, Jesus Christ. Because they just looked really creepy in the dark. And I shouted to my husband, I went, God, these chalk men look really creepy in the dark. And then just something about the chalk men, just, when you say just a line, isn't it, that triggers something. I was like, that could be a title for a book. And then the idea of this kind of like this childhood game, because we've all seen chalk drawings on the pavement. We've probably all drawn chalk drawings on the pavement. The idea of this kind of childhood game with chalk figures that somehow turns creepy and terrifying, takes a dark turn. That sort of sparked the idea for the Chalkman. And I wrote it in between dog walking and looking after Betty and various other things, and eventually finished it and sent it off to not many agents. I think about 3 or 4, and one came back. I think 2 rejected it. One took a while to come back. By that time, I think I'd already heard from the agent Maddie Milburn I have now, and really, really liked it. but wanted me to rewrite some of it. So the killer actually changed in the Chalkman from my
right.
submission. Yeah, the initial submission that I sent to the version that was published, because they were like, would you be happy to go back and kind of revisit this? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. Yeah, you're probably right. So I went back and I rewrote about the final third of it, and submitted it again. And yeah, and then they took me on. And then it sort of went quite quickly. I think I signed with them in May, but then they didn't want to submit them for various reasons. And we edited and worked on it quite a lot, and eventually submitted to publishers in September. And I always remember, I think we submitted on the Friday. And then so I was all weekend thinking, oh my God, publishers might be reading my manuscript, and this is kind of terrifying and everything else. And then I was out dog walking, and it was Monday lunchtime, and I got
That's great.
mobile, and it was a London number, and I was like, oh my God, this is my agent. And I was 2 dogs here, and I was like, hello, and it was Maddie. And she basically, she said, we've had this preempt from one of the publishers, and she told me what it was. I had to sit down and burst into tears. And I remember saying, but we're not going to accept that. And I was a bit like, sorry, we're not. She's like, no, because we've got a lot of interest from other publishers, so I want to take it to auction. I was like, okay. But then it was like a terrifying, insane few days, because it went to auction, and that was nuts. And then in the US, a sort of similar thing happened. And then suddenly all these offers were coming in from different countries. And I'd say within the space of like 2 weeks, my life entirely changed, which is the dream. Obviously it is the dream. And I do not take it for granted. It was amazing. I was saying like, oh my God, this will allow me to write full time. And because, I'd hoped for maybe just a little bit of a deal that I could maybe cut down the dog walking, or, just allow me more time to write and stuff. And it was much more than that. And I'm forever grateful for that. I'm hugely, hugely grateful for the Chalkman and what it did, because it's allowed me to be a writer. Whatever else happens, it's given us, some financial security and allowed me to pursue this career. So I'm hugely, hugely grateful for that book and for everything that happened with it. So it was a bit of a whirlwind. And that was kind of where it went. So I went from like basically dog walking for £10 an hour to kind of like within 2 weeks going, oh my God, this is insane. I've actually published in 40 countries. This is nuts.
That's incredible. That's the dream. Yeah. And to know that you did that right out the gate, I think, knowing what we've discussed earlier, it's great, isn't it? But it's also a big expectation that you've started there. So I bet you're kind of always chasing that after that.
I think there's the danger. Some people say, you have a big debut, it can be a curse. Actually, it can be sort of poison chalice. And I was naive enough not to realize that at the time. And I was perhaps naive enough. I perhaps didn't appreciate the wonderful things I got with the debut, like posters and things like that, and tube posters and all the rest. But I think I realized quite quickly from sort of book 2 that you don't get all the bells and whistles second time around. And actually, it's kind of up to you. It was wonderful, sort of getting that big debut. But then essentially, you've got to stay published. You've got to make sure the next book is good. You've got to make people buy the next book and the next book and the next book. And that's kind of on your shoulders from there on in. You don't get that debut again. You have to knuckle down and you have to work hard and you have to keep writing, hopefully, books that people want to read, and not, let your books and your sales then fall off a cliff. So it is a constant process, and it's not a straight, you go from here and up here. You might start here and then go down here, and then maybe come up here, or then go down there, or you might go sort of flat. It's a constant journey. It's not it's not a simple thing. It's not, I published, that's the end of it. I can just kick back and relax and be an author. It's constant sort of hard work I love. But there are lots of other commitments as well. There's promotion, there's social media, there's events. There's lots of other things that you don't sort of realize until you get into it all. But I love writing, and that's the key, isn't it? At the end of it, you get to make stuff up for a living, and that's what I always remind myself is an amazing thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and to know that people are reading it and you're changing how they feel about something, you're giving them a good day or a really bad day in the case of some of yours, like, you're wrecking somebody's sleep, or you're, making them look. It was with the Chalkman, it was on those books that made me look out the corner of my eye as I was walking down the street. And that's what I'm craving. That's what I want to do to readers, and that's what I'm always looking for. I'm looking for a book that seeps into my life, and your books definitely do that. So it's been so lovely to ask you about all the things. But now I'm going to go to a few questions. I think we've already answered some of them as we've talked. So Jen at Literary Lane wanted to know if you have any more short stories in the works, which you said yes. So that's good news.
I do. I am hoping to do another collection, and I already know what I'm going to call it. So there we go.
Yay, that's exciting. And Mark A. Williams on Twitter, or X as it's now called, wanted to know if you'd ever write a series, and you've said probably not. Could we not tempt you to? I kind of want more Burning Girls and The Gathering, particularly, please.
I would really like to carry on The Gathering, whether it will be in book form or whether it's been optioned. All of my books have. Depending on maybe on what happens with that, it could be book form, it could be script form. I don't know. I'd really like to sort of carry on the story of The Gathering in some form or another. Yeah, it's perhaps the only book I really sort of would quite like to pursue in that way, because most of the others are really self-contained stories. The Drift and The Gathering are the ones I left more open. Because you spend a lot of time creating those worlds. It might be nice to revisit those worlds, and I would like to do more with Barbara. So we'll see on that front, but it's not going to be the next book, or possibly even the book after that.
I do want to see more Barbara, and I can just see her being transplanted somewhere else.
Oh yeah, somewhere else. It would be, same world, but maybe somewhere different, and then expanding the whole vampire mythology. I could have a lot of fun with that, and I think it's time, isn't it? And then there's sort of the publisher's commitments of to a degree what they would like you to do. But at some point, somehow, I think there will be more Barbara.
Yay! That's what I wanted to hear. And Sharon Joy Reeds wanted to know the important question: what is your favourite horror movie?
Oh, my favourite horror movie. Now, here's the thing: I'm actually a real wimp. I am such a wimp. I haven't watched proper horror movies for years and years and years because they just stay with me too much. I couldn't do that whole phase of where it was kind of like torture porn. I just can't. No. Can't do that. I don't like it. I don't like gratuitous, just for the sake of it. And so it's probably not really a horror movie. So I watched Get Out quite recently, which I really enjoyed. And I guess you class that as a horror movie. I think that was really good. But a lot of my favorite horror movies are stuff that I watched when I was a lot younger, probably in the 80s and 90s. Like one of my favorite, and again, it's not even really horror, but it is vampires. The Lost Boys is one of my all-time favorite films.
Can you see my bottle behind me? I've got the bottle that Michael drinks out.
Oh, it is, isn't it? I can see that before behind your head. Oh, that's awesome. That is one of my all-time favorites. And then I watched a lot of classic, kind of classic horror around that time, Nightmare on Elm Street and all that type of stuff. So I really loved that era of kind of horror movies. And I haven't watched a lot of modern ones. There's a few that I want to catch up on, but I quite like horror movies that flirt with kind of like quite self-aware as well. So that's why I quite like stuff like Get Out. And what's the one that was recent with the doll thing that looked quite fun? I can't remember what it's called.
Not Annabelle. I know what I can picture her, the one who did all the dances and stuff.
Yeah. And that looks suitably creepy. But I haven't watched a lot of proper horror because I'm a wimp. I am actually a wimp when it comes to horror. I remember watching, is it The Ring? Is that the one with the girl crawls out the TV? Yeah. Oh, God, creepy children, actually. I love writing creepy children, but creepy children, oh, God, that really does it for me. Creepy children, that just, for ages, that stayed with me. There's just something about it. And now it's become like a parody of itself, and you always kind of laugh at that. But at the time, it really freaked me out. And things that seem like too real sometimes as well. Because actually, maybe that's why I like doing scary stuff, because I'm still really easily scared. I can still, if I go out at night and it's really dark, because it's really dark here because it's rural, to like go and put something in the bin, imagine a zombie come lurching around the corner. And I was still kind of half run back to the house, even though I'm going, so it's just as ridiculous, but I'm actually kind of scurrying back to the house because I have an idea that someone's going to grab my shoulder any second.
Me too.
So, I'm really pathetic with horror movies.
My scariest nightmares are the ones, because I still have nightmares, fully grown adult, where like giant dinosaurs are chasing me or zombies have been unleashed, and you wake up like dripping in sweat. Maybe this is the writer brain that we never quite like. That shadow behind your door could be a serial killer. Therefore, it
really could. It absolutely could. I had this house in Stockport for ages, and there was a cellar door in the living room, and it wouldn't shut properly. There's always like a little bit of that's where the sliver of darkness came from. That little darkness. And it was a creepy cellar. It was like not kitted out. It was where you go down the steps, and it was just like, oh, something creepy about it. I couldn't bear it. I had to put a bookcase in front of it eventually because I kept thinking I'd see a hand come around the edge of it, and it would just torment me. I'd be watching the telly, and my eyes would be constantly looking at this damn door in the corner. So I think that's it. Perhaps you just never grow out of like constantly. Your mind's always going, always ready to be scared and creeped out.
Love it. Maybe that's why we keep coming back to writing it. My last two questions from me. Do you have a favourite vampire? Is it a Lost Boys one, or is it from something else?
I mean, David from the Lost Boys, probably great vampire, good vampire. Kiefer Sutherland, yeah, he was great.
Yeah.
I love Let the Right One In as well. It's a great one. I can't remember the name of the girl vampire in that now.
No, I can't. I can picture her.
Eileen or something, but I don't think it is. Oh, yeah, I can't think from the original film, but that, yeah, great, creepy child vampires are creepy as well. So yeah, but I think probably we'll go with David from the Lost Boys. Classic vampire. It's a good one.
He's just, I like like never, what's it like, sleep all day, party all night. It's fun to be a vampire. It's that kind of thing. Never grow old, never die. Like he kind of epitomizes that playboy vampire of just.
It was so. The Rock and everything. Betty watched it with me. She watched it quite recently with me, and she wasn't fazed by any of it at all. And then she had the one question, and she was, "Mummy, in the 80s, did all the boys have long hair?" Kind of, definitely the ones into rock, Betty. Yeah.
Quite a lot of mullets around.
Mullets, perms.
Oh, brilliant. And I don't know whether you can answer this question because it's probably secret, but can you tell us anything about what you're working on now?
Yes, I can. It's got a provisional title of The Cutters because it's set in a girls' boarding school called Cutters Hill. This quite sort of remote kind of old girls' boarding school, and it's set mostly in 2005. I say mostly because there's time travel involved. So there is a serial killer in the present day who can travel within time, and has a unique kind of modus operandi that they select a victim in the present, but they don't kill that victim. They go back in time to kill their mother to prevent the victim ever being born.
That's killing.
And so it's partly in the present there, and mostly set a lot of the time in 2005 at a girls' boarding school. And it centers on 4 girls who find something strange in the woods, and when they emerge from this strange underground chamber, they find the woods. They find that everybody in the school has disappeared, or so they think, because literally the next day, our detective, there's a erstwhile detective, is called to the school to investigate the disappearance of 4 girls. So we kind of work in 2 or 3 time frames to find out what's going on with the school, and there's a serial killer, and it all works together somehow. So so that's what I'm working on at the moment.
That sounds fantastic. Do you find time travel a headache to execute it, or because when I'm watching it, it makes me scratch my brain so much? Time travel.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to fudge it quite a lot. I mean, to be honest, and I think you have to invent your own rules a little bit. Though I have been doing, making my brain hurt reading things about block universes and many universes and tachyons, and and all sorts of weird physics stuff, just to make it sound a bit knowledgeable in there, quite frankly, because you kind of got to go with it a bit when you're dealing with time travel. But I think throwing in a little bit of knowledge in there, and then just kind of like having a little bit of fun with it, it's a little bit. It took me a while to get the structure right on it, actually, because there is that element involved, and I ended up writing quite a bit that I dumped quite a lot of as well, because I was making it too complicated for myself. So then once I've got the structure right, it's kind of hanging together now. About 2/3 of the way through, so I should hopefully finish by summer. Yeah,
that's really exciting. Oh, thank you so much. I think that's one of the longest interviews I've done because I've just asked you so many questions. So
I do have a tendency to ramble on.
No, it's great. I wanted to know all the things, so I was just like, I'm gonna have to watch it back and take notes of all the advice you've given. It's been really useful and lovely to talk to you.
Oh, it's really lovely to speak to you as well.
So I'm going to sign off there, and then we will still be able to talk to each other and continue the conversation if we want. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Of course, if you haven't already, you need to check out C J Tudor's amazing books. Like I said, if you want somewhere to start,
I should hold one up, shouldn't I? Really,
I've got it. It's here. Look, I'll not let you down. There you go. Look at that. It's beautiful as well. It's very rare that I keep the proof and the physical finished book, and I'm going to these because it's so gorgeous as well. So yes, and I think, did I see there's got a little note. Look at the end papers in this.
I love the end papers. They're so lovely. All it was missing was a spread. Would have loved to have a spread.
Yeah, I mean, can we not just sort this out for CJ's next book, please? Whoever is in charge of the spreaders of the universe.
Spreaders!
Oh, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, CJ, for joining us, and hopefully you will check out my next author interview soon. Bye.
Hey, bye.